Welcome back. So as I spoke to you last time in my speech, my self-analysis speech, now I'm moving on to my speech 2, which is my informative speech. It is about communication deficits in children with autism. So first, let me start off with a brief description of autism. Autism is defined in the DSM under the Access to Diagnoses. It is no longer under the umbrella of mental retardation. It is now its own diagnosis and spectrum called autism spectrum disorder, which falls underneath many categories some people know as intellectual disability, oppositional defiant disorder. Downs is not. Many people do think that Downs is usually part of autism, but it's not. And many people think that when they say, oh, he has autism, most of the times people think, oh, like Rain Man. They think of all these famous people that they know, whether in movies or real life, that have autism. And some stereotypes are somewhat true. I tend to believe that they are versions and forms of the truth. However, I do feel like there is a common misconception in our society about what autism is, what it looks like, and what we can expect from people with autism. So first, the biggest thing I want people to understand, which is the purpose of this speech, is to understand the communication deficits in children with autism and how that is the largest contribution to their deficits overall. And if society and their community and their families were to simply understand or empathize, it would be a lot easier. So to first understand this, there is communication. And most of us think communication, well, that's speaking. However, several people that have autism, young, old, boy, girl, it doesn't matter, one of the largest and single most impairing deficits that they have is in communication. Most are considered what people would say nonverbal. However, that term has been revised and is now decided that it is going to be called non-vocal. Simply because a child is not making vocalizations does not mean that they are not verbal. They do have a communication, but it's not what we would consider intelligible. So I could not sit here and have a conversation, so to speak, as many of you have witnessed in our work. I could not sit down and have a conversation with a child with autism. However, many of them will use Proloquo2Go, whether on an iPad or a tablet, or they can hit buttons and it can say, hello, I want cookie. And they can make those distinctions for themselves. So they are, in essence, verbal. There are other forms of what we call augmentative communication devices. Proloquo2Go is one of the examples I just shared with you. There are also other forms, the Vantage, the Dynavox. There are what we call the Big Macs, which are children with cerebral palsy or other physical impairments where they don't have the dexterity to be able to push buttons, or they can just hit a little button and it can say whatever is pre-programmed in there for them. There also might be a picture exchange communication system where they can exchange pictures, and it's kind of the rogue form of the Proloquo2Go before iPads came out. So we do now consider them to be non-vocal, also because several of the children use signs as well. So another large impairment that their communication affects is their social cognitive development. Many of you think, well, how does one make friends? How does one interact with other people in their community, in their family? Usually by speaking or communicating some form of a need. Whether that communication is verbal or not, all of us have some form of communication, and that is how relationships are built. This is how many children or individuals with autism have that social impairment. They are not able to effectively communicate their need. They can't say, excuse me, I need water, please. Many of them will do other things that the rest of us might consider odd or weird, and therefore it impacts our ability to have a relationship with them because we consider it to be not functional. Some of that we look at might be what we call stimming, And stimming is a version of a communication that a person with autism might have, communicating that they are overwhelmed in their sensory world, whether it is their physical sensory or their mental sensory. So if these lights were too much for me, I might sit here and I might rock back and forth like this, plugging my ears, stimming on the lights. I'm communicating to you that the lights and the sounds that they might be making are too much. But I can't tell you that they're too much because I don't have the words. If I'm really happy that this marker looks really cool when I wiggle it up and down, I might flap my arms like this and jump up and down. Many of you could interpret that as being really excited. But many of them can't look at you and say, wow, I'm really happy right now. So that, in essence, is going to impair other people's ability to look at that behavior as normal and say, wow, I want to have a relationship with them. Because most people don't understand it, it impairs the child's ability to have a normal functioning social relationship. Which leads me to the last point, which are their behaviors. Sometimes we can look at their behaviors as being quite odd or eccentric, and most definitely acute. And the patients that you all and I work with here at the psychiatric hospital are most definitely acute. We see on a daily basis children with behaviors that are very maladaptive. They have no words to be able to communicate what they're feeling. So they have learned that banging on a gets people's attention. They have learned that throwing things across the room that they don't want communicates to their teacher, their mother, their friend, I don't want this. I don't want to do this. And many of us will look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's so odd. Why are they being so bad? Many of you right now can probably think of people in the grocery store that you've seen. Mothers with children who are having fits on the floor. And you're looking and go, wow, how can she let him do that? He's acting so bad. You don't know. Maybe they're having a meltdown because they can't communicate to them, I want this. Imagine if you had to walk around all day with no cell phone, no laptop, no tablet, and a duct tape across your mouth. Many of us can't even function for 5 minutes in our world without our cell phone glued to our head. Imagine if you had no words and you had to communicate to people throughout the day everything you wanted. It would be very difficult. I guarantee within an hour you would become so frustrated that you too would exhibit some very acute behaviors. And this is why it's very important to understand how communication is so central to the functioning of children and individuals with autism and how it affects them. So now that you know a little bit about autism, and you know that a lot of their behaviors, their oddities, stem from their level of communication. Hopefully this has enlightened some of you to think outside of the box next time you're at the grocery store, or next time you see somebody who's having behaviors, or perhaps next time you personally interact with somebody and you think, wow, they're so weird. You can look at yourself and think, I wonder if they have autism or Asperger's. And then your relationship with that person might be a little different, all because you've understood what their level of communication looks like. So thank you all for listening to what I have to say, especially since you all know about it yourselves because we work here. But I wanted to thank you, and I want to thank you as well, Professor, for being able to sit down and listen to what I had to say about children with autism.